you're looking for a multiple on that. 20% of profits goes to the GP, 80% of profits goes to the actual LPs. So if you have, let's say, a 3x on a, let's say you have a 3x on a $100 million portfolio, so you take $100 million bucks, you make $400 million in the back, we take 20 of 300, the rest of the limited partners, those like super ultra high net worth individuals, institutions, pension funds, folks like that, where probably your retirement is sitting somewhere, that's being, is actually receiving 80% of the actual profit. So, if you do a good job and you can raise multiple funds and actually deploy capital and get some great deals and have a 2, 3, 4x return, it's a really great business to be in. And the best guys in the industry, they're looking for 3, 4x returns. So you put $100 million bucks in, right? You get $300 million, $400 million back. That's kind of the expected return. But it's also an alternative asset class, which means it's extremely risky. So if somebody gives me their money, they're not going to see a return for 10 years. That's the deal. And I might come back to them and be like, hey, I lost all your money. And they have to be cool with that. So that's why they're riding around like a convoy of Escalades, because they just don't care. And typically these folks will actually deploy a portion of their portfolio into venture, a portion into hedge funds, a portion into into private equity, into bonds, right? They're super diversified across all kinds of different asset classes. And so venture is just one very, very small portion of that, and it's usually considered the super risky stuff. But it's also the super sexy stuff. Because if you're an early stage investor and you get to say, like, I put 50K into Uber back when they were like 2 kids and a laptop, then you're like having a really good day right now. So that's essentially what we're doing here. And I feel like I'm dominating the conversation, so I'll do this slide and kick it over to you. But listen, I put this inside Air Force terms, right? The Air Force likes to talk about the OODA loop, Lieutenant Colonel Boyd, right? Observe, orient, decide, act. This is how they're actually making decisions inside the military. Got it. When I was a Marine officer, I was using an acronym called METTC, which is mission, enemy, troops, time, terrain, civil consideration. So every decision I had to make was METTC dependent. That was the joke. Like, hey, Lieutenant, what are you gonna do? Like, this shit's METTC dependent. Okay, like you don't know what the hell's going on. In the venture space, I just made this acronym up because I'm a Marine. It's called Pod C. But generally speaking, people are thinking about who are the people that they're investing in? Who are the founders and the management teams? Are they serial entrepreneurs? Are they graduates of the best schools in the world? Do they have the right technical degrees or pedigree in the background? 2, the opportunity. What is the size of the market? What's the value prop of what you're actually bringing to market? How are you going to capture? What's your game plan in your business model? D, the deal. This is, I'm going to take, let's say, $15 million in the A round, and how much am I going to be diluted? And by the way, people like to say non-dilutive capital is good. In the venture space, it's almost the opposite. Obviously, I want to dilute you. However, these people that dilute you and sit on your boards are people who have brought, for example, on our board, 11 companies to IPO. So you want to become a billion-dollar company? Well, this guy's done it 11 times. Who else is going to do this, right? Like, who has the relationships in the private equity space or wherever else to actually get your ass acquired? Well, that's really, really valuable. So who's the deal? What is the deal? What are those terms? How are you diluting yourself in a very smart way? You're taking smart money, dumb money. There's all these terms that are in the industry. And last, context. And Air Force actually falls into a really interesting portion of the context argument because contextually people think, well, DoD is a really bad bet. Like, why would I ever work? I'm a startup with DoD, 18, 24-month sales cycle. And that's essentially the baseline assumption that AFWERX actually disproven, which is really, really cool. They're able to get money flowing really, really fast, which actually overcomes and is influencing and changing some of the regulatory, technological, and macro trends that come out of the U.S. federal government. So really exciting stuff that's going on.
And I think on some of the context too is depending on what stage, and we'll get into stages of companies in a little bit. The federal government is really, really important in bringing, that seal of approval. So you're talking about maybe a cyber company that's coming out and they're working in highly regulated industries, so insurance, they're working in banking, et cetera. But getting that federal government stamp of approval to say, no, I'm also working with the Air Force on X, Y, or Z, and being able to say that even in the private sector, it really helps their business a lot.
Market.
So as we're looking at the market, we really, really want to know and understand what are those big trends, what are those unsolved problems. But each company, I know will say when he talks to all of these companies, he's asking, what are those unsolved problems, but how are you going to do it different? And what is your value add? What's your differentiator? And it can't just be, I know one person here or one person there. These are big, big places, 10x or better. What is the actual value add. And then a VC looks at what's the overall market. And the federal market is huge. So a lot of times startups are going into the federal market and they just see dollar signs. And they might not totally understand how long it takes to get to those dollars. And that's why AFWERX and Air Force getting capital out quickly is so important. And then how fast can you grow this? So is this a new industry? Are you the only person in this industry? What are your competitor analysis look like? And with the AFWERX Cyber Phase 1, you're getting a lot of that market context and market analysis, and you're gonna be able to provide those as data points going further.
Yeah, I think my only comment that I'll make about markets is that, best-in-class startups are primarily building for the commercial space, full stop. There's only a couple of startups that actually became billion-dollar entities by focusing on federal first, and it's SpaceX, Palantir, right? But Palantir even took, 6 years before they had an actual government contract, and they took, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, or excuse me, in funding. I'm making this up, but I'm probably, if I could guess, that's probably all very, very true. And so, of the $377 billion entities that were created in the last 10 years, they all were developing for the commercial space. And so, the last thing, that really is like kind of the inflection point here with commercial is, are you capturing the existing commercial marketplace, or are you creating a new marketplace? So, a venture guy would also think about this, right? Like, if there's only a certain number of tokens that can be sold in New York City for taxis, and it's about like how many tokens you can buy, and there's like, a set amount of money to be made in the taxi industry or market, then my startup would be super interested in how many tokens am I going to get. I'm going to own 70% of all the tokens, have this big massive market share. Or you could be like Uber and come in, you could like decentralize the issue, make everyone a 1099 on your, right? And then all of a sudden you've made a complete new market that's like outmaneuvered the traditional taxi stuff. And that's where, context in the last slide kind of comes in. So thinking about the market, thinking creatively, how's the founder thinking about it, how are they going to capture it, what's the business plan to do that, are all super compelling and kind of cool things that we're looking at. And ultimately, one of the guys that sits on our board, Mark Andreessen, he says, listen, Mark's the #1 killer for a company. You could have probably a bad technology, and if there's a big market and nobody else is competing for it, well, you're going to be the one that fills that market space. But if it's a saturated market and there's not that much money going around, these are also considerations that we're looking at. So listen, I spent some time in the Marines, right? And so I've made a couple of these slides to look like military slides for the PMs and the Air Force guys and whoever else is here. And I know that there's some other ground guys here that are probably rolling their eyes. Please, yeah, whatever. All right, so listen, when you get into the private sector, startups typically look at the marketplace as maneuver warfare. They don't know it's maneuver warfare, but they're definitely looking at it this way. And that means that, like, if they're not moving, right, if they're not identifying the critical vulnerabilities in the landscape ahead of them, they're not thinking about where they're going to concentrate their fires, if they don't know who their enemies are, or their competitors are, or who they can actually have a partnership with and share information and intel with, then they're not going to be particularly competitive. And ultimately, and I felt this way when we raised our first fund, obviously, we felt like maneuver warfare, when in doubt, just get to a different location. Move to a new location, climb a new hill, collect more intelligence, see if you get shot at, like collect more intel on what's going on. And that's really where like the adage, complacency kills. Everybody hears this before you step out on MSR, like, keep your head on a swivel and all this trash. I mean, yeah, the deal is that like you're a startup, you're actually like fighting for your life to put food on the table, and this is basically the life that you're actually embracing. I don't know, people like to call it the grind or the hustle or whatever it is. So if you're a veteran or you're thinking about getting out of the service and going to the startup space, like, life doesn't get easier. It's just more complicated, actually, but you got to pay for healthcare here. Do you have anything for this slide? Well, so like, think about this, right? Elon Musk, I mean, I'll give you guys, maybe 10 seconds to read this, 15 seconds for the Marines. Awesome. So, just thinking backwards on the problem. Let's talk about business models.
Yeah. So we touched on this a little bit, but what assumption does everyone make that's categorically inaccurate, right? So Will talk to someone who he's looking to invest in, and he's going to ask them this question. So what assumption in his Uber example, right? We're talking about tokens and taxi tokens. Well, the assumption that Uber was making was that taxi tokens is not the future. We can do this in a different way. And everybody likes to use Uber examples, but there's examples of this across the board in many, many, many of the companies that are here. So it's really important, I mean, sound business model, of course, but how do you de-risk this, and how do you think about it as both going into the venture capital community, but going into government as well? So is this innovative? Are there places where if we infuse capital, you could actually have a huge return on investment? So in this way, the business plan is really important, and Will is going to look through, what is the market size, what is the return, what is the expected return, and how are you doing it so much better than anyone else so that you can capture that market? We work a ton with dual-use technology. So every company that Decode is working with is actually going after that commercial space, and the federal government is probably going to be 10, 15, maybe 20% of their revenue, but that's maybe 10, 15, 20% of their revenue in 10 years. But getting those first few wins is really, really important to shaping that overall market, and what is that going to look like, so that they can project out and say, I've gotten this commercial, I've gotten these deals in commercial over and over again, I'm doing really well in commercial, and now what is the federal government going to give me? And we use that in a lot of, so as we do a competitive process for entry into our program, we make sure that they have some commercial sector traction. We don't want just the, I made it for government, my sales cycle is going to be 24 months plus, and all of my revenue is going to come from federal. We're really looking at that commercial off the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you talk to somebody who's doing their PhD, for example, and you say, hey, what are you writing your dissertation on? And they can't explain it to you in 30 seconds, then it's because they don't really know yet. And that's okay. They'll spend another 7 years trying to figure it out. But the idea is, if you say to a company, what universal truth do you know to be true that everybody else is making this massively wrong assumption about? And typically a person will be like, listen, I know X to be true, everybody else thinks Y. But because X is true, Z is this marketplace, and here's my game plan to attack it. We had one startup, for example, that said, listen, we think that there's going to be a future in autonomous, beyond line of sight, resupply drones. We said, okay, but that's great, but have you talked to the FAA? There seems to be a lot of regulations around, national airspace and integrating autonomous and this, that, and the other thing. And he goes, yeah, no problem. Thought about that. Already have, let's call it, $1 million in recurring revenue, because I've already sold into Southeast Asia and West Africa. Like, well, what's in Southeast Asia and West Africa? His response is, well, it's not what is there, it's what's not there. There's no FAA. So I partnered with a major, it wasn't a major prime, defense prime, it was a major logistics distributor that everybody would know their name, and they had relationships with whatever prince from Nigeria, and we fucking paid them money, and now we can fly. And I went to the FAA and I told them, I have 1 million flight hours of safety here. Can I get a beyond line of sight certificate to fly here in the United States? And they said, yes. And now he's flying a 10-mile route here in the United States in upstate New York, integrated with manned aircraft, which is pretty unique. Because this young entrepreneur said, I'm going to go into open space, kind of like soccer, right? Pass the gun.
Well, and that's a really good example too of the government can provide that just extra boost of, if he did not get that waiver to go and fly from the FAA, but if he didn't have all those flight logs, the government really can open up that commercial market. Because once he has that, that's his golden ticket, because not many people can get that.
So let's take it a step further. So he's got this awesome commercial revenue. Great. He's known in the space as having this beyond line of sight capability. We bring him to the Navy SEALs. They dump a little bit of money into him. Okay, so now he's got a contract with the Navy SEAls. Goes out and raises a $20 million A round from a top tier VC. So all of a sudden, this $5 or $6 million contract that he got from DoD has just been quadrupled by some of the best investors in the world that backed Snapchat and others. Now he gets to say, the government and the private sector basically have a P3 relationship or whatever it is, right? A public-private partnership in a sense, because their financial incentives are aligned. Great, so now he's got money in the bank, he's got a contract, he's talking to some PMs over at NFW, and they say, listen, we got to get you on a range. So we're going to bring you down to, I don't know, wherever, Camp Pendleton, open up a range, and I can get you on the logs, the stars, so we can get you in here, right? Whatever, it's 2 months out. And the kid says, no, I got $20 million. I just bought an airport in Arizona. Why don't you guys come out here? It's okay, let's do that, right? So the kid's going out and buying an airfield. He bought one, in Phoenix and LA and San Francisco. He's got capital now. And now what he does is, he owns the Class A, B, C airspace above it. Now he can fly anytime he wants here in the United States. Now what he's doing is, he's actually looking to maybe lobby the FAA to open up a couple lanes between his airfields. And then call Uber and say, please come up these, please come up these packages people are ordering. Anyways, long story short, the idea is that, a founder like this, super creative, has a business model that's going to get there and is persevering in a creative way. So, for a startup, they're thinking about these three factors, right? How much money am I going to raise? From who do I actually want to sit on my board, right? What is smart money? And on what terms am I going to be taking them from? I mean, am I going to take, $5 million to dilute myself by 50%? That really doesn't show like you have very much conviction in the future of your company. So if you're fighting tooth and nail over terms, then that's also a pain in my ass, but it signals wealth. Yeah, I have to pay more for it. I really just wanted an excuse to put this picture in. But we'll talk about structured financing here. So listen, this is a hypothesis-driven entrepreneurship. Somebody has an idea. These are like all the guys you're working with right now. They're winning SIPR phase 1s and SIPR phase 2s. This is kind of like what's going on at a macro level in their head. You got an idea, they're generating a business model, now they're testing that and they're seeking their MVP, right? Their minimum viable product. What are they building? How are they going to capture it? And now they've got all these questions right here. Am I going to find product market fit? Am I going to perish and fall off the face of the earth because what I'm building is like underwater basket weaving shoe? And then or do I have to pivot because nobody wants an underwater basket weaving shoe? Or am I going to persevere and just say, hey, listen, I'm going to grind this out and keep bootstrapping. I'm confident people need these shoes for when they do underwater basket weaving. And I believe that there's a market here. Guy never gets another VC to call him back. But listen, most of the folks, right, like 5% of them, they find product market fit immediately, but the vast majority of them, 95% of them, I'm making these numbers up, don't find product market fit right off the bat. So as a result, they got to test. And so they pivot, or they persevere, they go back, they raise a little bit of money, they buy some more time, they're building out their product, they're developing. So again, in the SIPR process, you guys are kind of like playing right here, right? Like folks are developing and testing and exploring new ideas and new technologies, and that's super awesome. And some of them, let's say they do have a great product market fit, boom, direct to phase 2. Why? Commercial revenue, they've got VC backing, they're already off and away. The government actually has to make them a better deal because the private sector is offering a pretty good deal right now, which is continued sales. And once they find that good product market fit, they're off and scaling. And there's different investors that come in at this stage.
Well, and yeah, so on the product market fit side too, you're going to see, so this obviously simplifies it, but as you pivot and iterate and you go back, a lot of these companies have some product market fit and are tweaking, and are tweaking, and are tweaking. And so that product market fit, I think, is really important in that, it's not just something that happens and then you go for it, but it is redefining. It's getting that first MOU signed and being able to say, oh, this is what you liked about this. I bet that there's 3 other customers that like the same type of thing. I'm going to do that and maybe pitch that a little bit differently and be able to figure out what the Air Force is actually pulling in.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this. It's called the J curve. This is basically the fundamental trajectory of a startup. What we're going to do is we're going to build slide by slide what's going on in the brain of a startup and how investors are responding to it, and then you can see just what they're facing. So this is the J curve. Basically starts at D-Day, right? Day zero, and moves forward. Want to raise capital, you ultimately end up spending more, spend more money. If you raise capital, you dilute yourself, you're basically going into debt. You're at a negative revenue. And the VC at this point, when he's looking at a young company who's like raising a C-stage company, or maybe even just like angel checks, he's thinking to himself, well, maybe there's a market here, and maybe you have the technology. But really, what I'm interested in is learning if there is a market here. And you seem like somebody who might be able to figure this out because you're pretty smart. So I'm going to give you some money because I think if I give you $1 million, you're going to come back to me in 2 years from now, and you're going to have some awesome insights that are going to inform my future investments. So that's really all that I'm doing. I'm not picking a winner from day one. I'm just saying maybe there's a solution, maybe you have the solution, maybe there's a market, and I need the intelligence on this. And ultimately what they're doing, right, is that every time you take money, you dilute yourself, you put yourself in the cap table, and by the way, if break this down for you like Barney style, cap table, basically a piece of document, says, hey, so-and-so person gave you X amount of money, they own X% of the company, raise another price round, more people give you money, everyone gets diluted. But it's basically like a master document that essentially tracks who owns what, who's who in the zoo, and it's super important because when you ultimately, you have a cap table, it actually becomes, like a taxable event. If somebody's owning and maintains capital, with a company, And these are publicly searchable documents. So as we talk about foreign access and influence, other countries that are coming in and actually buying forces on companies, the question is, well, if they're on the cap table, we can find them. Maybe. There's actually other ways they can hide, but long story short, that's what that very simplistic thinking is. Boom, it's on the cap table. So what is the takeaway for DoD? Takeaway is, don't waste people's time. I know that's crass maybe, or like sounds like a jerk, but like, listen, these guys have $1 million. And so you waste their time with like 4 months of phone calls, and they can't get like flash to bang, like finding revenue, finding like new customers, and essentially you're forcing them to have to raise more money for somebody like me. So I don't know, maybe I'm sitting here like take more phone calls. Yeah, don't do that. What we want to do is we want to build companies quickly that are of value, that are like expanding. All right, we want to pour jet fuel on them and like let them go. We don't actually want to nickel and dime them. So typically for our companies, we say, listen, there's 3 things that you need to find out from the government. How much money, what contract vehicle, and what's the timeline. If you can't figure that out in 3 phone calls, start ghosting them. It's like triage is the most important thing. Figuring out who's in the zoo, who's real, who's not, who's a tech tourist, who's actually somebody who's like interested and like has some ideas around contracts and money that they're going to pull from. And those people are worth their weight in gold. So if you're a PM, or if you're talking to startups, and you're sitting there and you're like, hey, I want to like play the good idea fairies club here with you and like think about, maybe there's a job for you down in the future or something. Like, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. Like, the best way to like ingratiate yourself to the company, not that I'm giving you all advice to do it, is just to perform. Just like execute. Just like do the job, and like everybody's super, super happy. And guess what? That company is like growing in the future, and of course they remember you and all that jazz, so you're taking care of yourself. But bottom line up front, do not waste the company's time, because the company has no time. And they're ultimately just going to continue going into debt, and that's terrible. Well, okay, so that's the first impression. Second impression, now they're raising capital, right? So as I raise capital, I got valuation. Valuation essentially, it's not really funny money, but the idea is that there's some, rough estimations and calculations, and some very loose methodologies that people use about the size of the market, the other competitors in the space, what you're doing, total amount of assets and resources that you have. So if I raise at the, $20 million is a massive seed, but like let's say I'm at the seed level and I raise $5 million, right? And my valuation might be now $5 million with a post-money valuation of $20 million. Oh, that's good. Yeah. So I raised $5 million bucks. I have a post-money valuation of $20 million. Awesome. Everyone says if this guy were to be sold tomorrow, he would be able to make $20 million off his company. Negative. That's kind of how it works, but like I was using this analogy earlier. Like when I was a kid, I used to have baseball cards. I had this like 1967 Topps rookie Rod Carew. I didn't know who that was. It was my most expensive card. It's like 90 bucks. And I was like going around with my friends like, hey, who wants to buy my Rod Carew? It's worth $90. And everybody said, no, I don't know who the hell Rod Carew is. Like my dad was interested, right? He was like, oh, I remember that guy. Well, I couldn't find a buyer essentially. And so it wasn't worth $90. Simply put, it was worth $0. I couldn't find somebody to buy it for $0. And I couldn't like give it to somebody. So as a result, if you have a company and you have these valuations, it's really kind of a rough metric to sit there and go like, hey, this is what I'm valued at. But if you're a PM and you're looking at the company and you're thinking to yourself, well, what was your valuation after your seed? What was your valuation after Series A? What was your valuation after Series B? Are they increasingly going up? Are they collecting more assets? Do they have access to more resources? Are they spending their money wisely? Do they continue to have investors and good investors that are actually involved in their subsequent rounds, continuing to co-invest or lead those rounds? Then those are all really, really great signals. If somebody says to you they have a $250 million valuation or a $750 million valuation, they do not have $750 million in the bank. They probably have a lot of money in the bank, but you also have to remember the higher valuation, the smaller the DoD market looks to them. So if I have a $750 million valuation or a $1 billion valuation, I'm not worried about severance. Like I'm worried about getting to the IPO and selling and like buying a boat like in wherever, right? Like that's what I'm interested in. But if you're talking to a guy at the seed through Series A or like a Series B company, maybe they're software and they're struggling to get some revenue, then you can definitely like actually target that person effectively. And that's the way that I would think.
And as you're doing market research, the different valuations are really good data points for you. So as you're looking at going from C to A to B, who's involved in each round? Are they some of the best VCs? And also, are they raising down rounds? Are they actually increasing in value over the course of time? Those are all signals and indicators as you're doing market research on what kind of company you're looking at. Are they going to be around in 2 years? Are they going to be around in 5 years?
Yeah, okay, so that's actually a really great point. So a down round. So these are all up rounds, right? And like I'm worth $20 million, I'm worth $40 million, I'm worth $250 million, I'm worth $1 billion. Like up, up, up. That's great. A down round is like, hey, I'm taking money on. Let's say like I took an additional $50 million of funding, but the investors are actually valuating me. I was at 750, but now they're valuing me at $400 million. That's really bad signal. So that means that like it's not working out so hot for you. Example of like a tier one VC invested in a company owned by a celebrity. I just recently had a kid. This celebrity's company happens to have like they make like diapers and like kid packages and all this stuff. And I don't know. So I signed up for it. Found out they had a down round, and then I'm like on the app like trying to order shit. And I'm like, this is super hard. I can't even figure out how to cancel this shit. No wonder you got a down round. You know what I mean? Like, what is this? Yeah, it's crazy. Anyways, you can definitely see it in the company as they start to struggle. Okay, cash versus value versus cash balance. Listen, guys raising money. You ask them, hey, how much money did you raise? Oh, I raised $4 million. When did you do it? 2 years ago. Cool. When are you raising again? Next month. Guess who doesn't have money? That guy doesn't have money. It's great you have $4 million. Doesn't have $4 million anymore. So if you're going to sit there and be like, oh, well, I got this silver opportunity. It's 6 months out. Blah blah blah. He's going to be like, triage, boom, back burner. I need to go raise capital. You talk to a guy who just raised capital. I raised $4 million. When did you do it? 2 months ago. What was your valuation? How much money now? $16 million. Hey, that's pretty good, man. I didn't get some capital. Cool. There's an opportunity. It's in 6 months from now. Maybe it's 90 days from now. Whatever. Are you interested? Simple answer. Yeah, of course. We're interested in finding revenue. All right, cool. Well, every time that you go through this process, the ideate, development stage, finding your product market fit, right, hiring a sales team, scaling, you end up ultimately, well, I guess it's not a rule of thumb that you're raising more and more money, but your valuation is increasing. You are raising more and more money, but look how steep this gets. Like the actual burn rate actually gets steeper. So if you're at scaling, it goes way down. That's because you raise more money and you're in scaling. You're going overseas. You're hiring a ton of people. You gotta professionalize your company now. HR people, lawyers, accountants, all this crap, and it's super expensive. Guys that are at the seed stage who just raised a round, they're kind of making it up. They're on legal Zoom right now. I do this. Yeah. If they're on legal Zoom, that's bad. But yeah, I mean, so that's essentially what this is. Everyone talks about burn rate, inflection point. So this is kind of hey, where are the inflection points within this J curve? So a guy raised $4 million. You're talking to him. You know he's in the black there, or excuse me, he's in the red. He's spending a bunch of money building his product, hiring a couple engineers from Stanford who cost an arm and a leg, and boom, he has an inflection point. He gets his first customer. And that's really good. And then all of a sudden, the debt starts to peter up, right? He's spending $1 million, let's say a year. Now he's only spending, well, he's still spending $1 million a year, but he's bringing in $250K. He starts to it's starting to ease the bleeding here a little bit. And at some point, there's this point where he starts to go net revenue positive. And that doesn't mean that he's making money. It just means, well, it doesn't mean he's out of debt. It just means he's not losing money. That's a really important inflection point too. And typically that comes with additional customers. So this is kind of a complex thing. I mean, look at the actual trajectory of this burn rate, right? It's up, down, up, down, up, down. It's like a fucking roller coaster for these people. And in the startup space, they say there's two base emotions. It's terror and euphoria. It's everything's gonna blow up and I'm gonna be sued by somebody tomorrow. And then other times I'm yo, I just raised $4 million. I'm worth $16 billion. Here it is. So if you're aware of people's burn rate, when they last raised, their valuations, all super interesting. Now you're actually talking about their fumes. Are you on fumes? You're actually starting to map this crash out. You can be super effective in the way that you actually engage these people. Okay, boom. Here it is. Here's the mapped out brain housing group of a startup CEO. I mean, look at how complex this is. He's raising money, valuations, up rounds, down rounds, burn rates. Use developing a product, ship product changes, pivots, new markets, competitors, all this other stuff, going into debt constantly. Mom's calling him, that's fucking stressful. It's dude, it's normal crap. Maybe yeah, he's dude, you're the kid. I haven't slept, that's why I'm wired around. It's right. It's all these normal things are occurring. Guess what? This guy might be 22 years old. So in the Marines, if I had a 22-year-old that had this much shit on his plate, I'd be dude, you need to take a break. You're gonna snack, right? Well, this is exactly what these people are signing up for, and that's ultimately if you find someone who's measured and disciplined, they can really kind of break this down iteratively and handle it well. So there you go. One thing I used to say, I still say it. I don't know why I say that. The best leaders in the infantry are guys that are equal parts disciplined, equal parts creative. It's I like a guy that works out and is at work on time, is technically and tactically proficient, all that trash. But I also like a guy who understands the bigger picture. You ask him hey man, what book you reading? You can answer that question. That's really, really good. That's kind of the leader that VCs typically look at. it's a mature leader. And it doesn't mean it comes with age, but like all kinds of crazy people out there. One of our best CEOs is 23. He just got out of like Dr. Dre's incubator. And it's like, Dr. Dre's incubator is crazy, man. Like, is this like a serious thing? And yeah, it's serious. And he raised a lot of money from Sequoia, like the best investors in the world. And you know, every time I talk to him, I'm super, super impressed. You know, because when my fund implodes, I'm going to go to him for a job ultimately. So, yeah, these are the type of people you meet. You're just like, yeah, you're just really, really squared away. So.
And when you talk about that, this is the founder's brain, and this is the 22-year-old founder's brain, and it's going in multiple different directions. Then, like we said, the dilutive versus non-dilutive funding. To have a board seat and to have a board of advisors that are talking to this startup founder and being able to both make sure that they're staying very disciplined, but also can look and see those opportunities. So they're not staying in the same spot. They're moving. They're able to kind of do both of that. But a board of advisors, which generally will come with VC investing, is going to be really, really helpful in that scale and in that balance for those funders.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Yep, great. Can I read the quote? Got it. I just thought it was a cool graphic. Nice slide. Go ahead.
And so, as we're talking about whether that J curve, so this is what this looks like a little bit on the investor side. So you make that initial investment, you make that initial decision. Are you going to invest in this company? Do they have the market? Do they have the team? You go through and make those decisions. You might pass, you might invest. And an investment comes with pro rata. So you generally have the opportunity to invest in the next round. But you need to make those decisions again, right? So you're looking, again, has the team changed? Are they chasing shiny objects instead of actually going for that big picture play? Are they just trying to capture little revenue here, little revenue here? Or are they finding that stable core referenceable customer? That could be in the Department of Defense and it could be elsewhere. But you're using all of those data points to make those decisions. And what you've done is you've invested capital to get more data points. So now you're in your A round. You maybe invest in your C round. Now you're in the A round, and you have 2 years that you've looked at this company, that you've evaluated the CEO, that you saw what decisions they made, where they went, where they saw the market, where you saw the market. You're also able to put in a whole lot of strategic brain power into this. So the CEO knows their business, knows their company, knows their market, hopefully better than anyone else. But it is that board, it is your strategic partners that will come in and just interject data points there. So in your A round, you've pushed out about 2 years of data, 2 more years of data points, right? And then you're making the decision to invest again or pass. And not only are you as a VC making that decision, but all the other VCs that you invested with are making that decision. You don't always have a all-in first round. I'm Harpoon and I'm putting in all $50 million, right? You want partners on that side too, so some diversification there. And then as you go into the B round, same thing. You are buying out 2 more years of data points. You company had the idea that we were going to get to Z, right? And how are we going to get to Z? And now I have 4 years to know whether I think you are going to get to Z. And so I make the decision to either invest or pass. And so that's going to be another really good data point as you're doing your market research, as you're talking to companies generally. Are the VCs staying on? Are the VCs injecting more capital into the business? Do they really believe in the business? So yeah, they got a Sequoia investment on the front end, but if Sequoia didn't come in on their C round, that's going to be a really good market indicator.
Part of the deal for VC is term sheet and what we're actually taking. Not always mean that we're taking massive portion of the company. When he gives you $1 million, take 40% of the company name. That's the type of founder you are. We don't want to do business with you. Instead, what we're talking about is cash flow rights and control rights. So typically, what I say is if I give you money, how much equity do I get? When can I exercise this equity? How do I get out? What are my exit options? How much control do I have over this? How do I ultimately bring this to IPO? Kind of delicately balancing the 2 sides of the house here. I mean, I'm not going to get into a conversation as a result of time, as the complexities of some of this, But bottom line up front, if you give a guy a $10 million check and he goes down and buys a Lamborghini and wraps it around a tree, that's a terrible idea, right? So there should be different provisions with that money and how. It's not actually about how you spend it or when you spend it. It's just about like the control over the company. Like, you know, if you're acting a certain way or doing certain things, can that person be removed? Can their, you know, portion of the company be diluted? And I think VCs get a pretty bad name for basically, you know, hijacking the company. But you know, listen, I mean, ultimately, when you give money to a company and you take equity in the company, I want nothing to do with actually running it day to day. First of all, you know, you make 30 investments, let's say, over 3 years. Like, I can't be involved in the tacking, decision making, the talk, you know, the tacking and blocking and tackling of actual like day-to-day decision making. So no, in fact, like if you're investing in best-in-class founders, then these are the people that can actually make these decisions day to day. And if you trust in them, then like they're the best stewards of your money and your investment. But ultimately, it is about like, you know, do I get a 4 seat? Do I get 2 4 seats? How do we control this? And ultimately, when it's time to sell, do I have enough power to bring this to private equity space, bring it to IPO, and control some of those economics of the company? Okay, out of the weeds a little bit. We're going to go into venture capital funds. What is our time after this? 10 minutes. All right, I'm going to flap my gum for 10 minutes. Venture capital funds. So they're not all equal, and they don't all do the same thing. All right. Some people do late stage, some people do early stage, some people do seed stage. Seed stage, angels, crowdsourcing funding, right? Seed stage VC funds, scout VC funds. Maybe they're doing like services for equity. A lot of folks trying to do that right now. Awesome model. You know, this could also be incubators, accelerators, and folks that generally speaking have, you know, the thumb on the pulse of the best-in-class companies coming out of Y Combinator, 500 startups, Decode. And ultimately, guys that are in the late stage, let's say somebody like an Andreessen Horowitz, Kleiner Perkins, cutting like massive 40, 60, $100 million checks. SoftBank, boom, $200 million checks, right? These people are like not in the weeds down at these like little like Y Combinator. I mean, they might have somebody like fishing around a little bit over there, but they're not down there like making investments at the seed or pre-seed, right? Like an angel check. These people are actually looking to folks that come earlier in this value chain and looking for their advice. So like, let's say Y Combinator says, hey, I'm making this up. I have, you know, no connection to Y Combinator, but let's say they say like, hey, I've looked at 1,000 companies this year. I really like these 100. Lightspeed comes in and says, I'll have your curated list. I really like these 20. Investments go down range, good to go. And Andreessen says, hey, I want to see Lightspeed's 20 investments, Benchmark's 20, and you know, they like start to go around all these investors, like trusted early stage, seed stage investors. Start choosing from their curated list, and boom, they start like essentially choosing the winners in that sense. So Andreessen's never like down in the trenches taking grenades and like returning fire. It's like guys that are actually, you know, at smaller funds that are doing that have different backgrounds. Interestingly enough, macro trends. Some of these big funds, like they say early stage, by the way, they're still writing massive checks. But late stage and early stage funds are actually moving earlier and earlier in the process. So they are actually writing bigger checks at the pre-Series A or at the Series A or C level. Like Andreessen, for example, might come in and actually write a $10 million check at the seed stage level, and it's like, well, I mean, like, that's crazy. Like, are you just trying to get rid of money? And the answer is yes. They're just trying to get rid of the money. And you know, ultimately, the question is like, well, how do you actually know who the winners are? I mean, if you have so many investments and such, you know, big checks, and you don't even have enough GPs to sit on the damn boards, like, how do you actually know, like, who's doing the Zoom and if there's actually a good investment? Well, guess what also is happening macro fund-wise, or excuse me, macro trend-wise? Micro funds are blowing up right now. It's like over 1,000 funds raising, like somewhere between $10 and $50 million of capital. These folks are specialists in actual like tech sectors, right? Like they are all PhDs in AI from like MIT. That's pretty good to go. Or they're specialists in a particular market. Maybe it's like, you know, a B2C market or a consumable market. So then they're going to have a micro fund that does that. So Andreessen and others, and you're probably watching the news, they're actually, you know, they don't even call themselves a VC anymore, right? They're all requiring all their GPs to go out and get registered as investment advisors, then go a little bit deeper into the crypto space. No idea if that's a good idea, but that's what they're doing. And they're saying, listen, we're not even a VC anymore. Really what we're doing is we're investing, right? Mark himself personally, and it's kind of like what happened with us. We're not going to give money to those micro funds that I think are experts in a particular spot. Just sit back and watch them and see what they bring forward. They actually even like pawn off their board seats to young micro funds. Pretty interesting stuff. So listen, this is like ultimately like our fund is kind of built upon my fund. This is like I'm going to talk about our fund real quick. My fund's built upon this premise right here: 97% unicorns, 97% of billion-dollar entities in the last 10 years. Right, of those 377, 97% of them backed by the same 10 VCs. That means the other, early stage, late stage VCs, call it 690 guys, like fighting over the scraps, the other 3%. So it's like, well, why don't you just co-invest with these guys? Like, you should see what they're investing in, right? And like, you just co-invest with them. Well, there's some realities. They don't want you to invest. They're cutting a $10 million check. They're like wiping everyone out. They're like, nah, you don't need anyone else. Elbow them out. Just me. And a young entrepreneur is not going to say no to, a Mark Andreessen being like, I just want to own this round, right? Because if you own this round, I've taken, 36 companies to IPO, and we make $1 billion together, and this is really going to be awesome. So, so it's about earning your right to actually invest or be alongside these folks. So we call that like a lead investor and then some strategics. Okay. Harpoon plays in the carve-out space. We'll say, hey, Mark says, hey, I'm going to put $8 million in a seed stage round. I want you to come in for $1.5 million as a carve-out, not as a strategic. Harpoon says, no problem, because our thesis is, if I get $1.5 million in investment, I'm also going to go out there. We have a little team, proposal writer team. We're going to win you $1.5 million in revenue. If you don't win that revenue, you don't have to take the money. So it's kind of like $3 million in money. You get a referenceable customer, you get some revenue, and you get the investment dollar. Pretty good deal. If Mark Andreessen was doing that, he's like, yeah, I'll give you $10 million and $10 million of revenue. That's, CEOs would be like, oh, that's amazing. Like, he's doing my job for me. That is actually kind of what he does. He has like corporate development, market development teams. You go to Andreessen, it's like 142 employees. It's crazy, right? And like everyone's a part. There's only like 8 or 10 guys that actually sign checks. They're called GPs. So it's important, by the way, if you're engaging with VCs to understand different partners, GPs, etc. Okay, so so that's kind of the place that we see. If the startup is asking me for money, it's like, hey, I don't need money. If a startup says, no, I'm cool with money, I don't need it. That's much better. And now it's all of a sudden like cat and mouse. I'm like, well, I actually want to get in your deal, right? Like, what can I do to get in your deal, and how can I make this work? So that's kind of the shtick.
And how we use a lot. I mean, so this is Harpoon's business model, right? But like how we use this 97% is on our side as we're doing a competitive process to get into our program. We're looking at who's investing in you. We're looking who's done the tech due diligence. Are you an EQTEL company? Are you, right? We have a whole host of things that we're checking the boxes on to say, you're primed for federal. We are going to help de-risk a whole bunch of this for federal. So we have relationships with those VCs so that we can bring them to the federal market.
Yeah. Counter argument. No, not, yeah. Let's do this. Okay, yeah. So counter argument. Somebody publishes who they're investing in, it's no longer a hot deal. So like I can see who Sequoia's investing in, that's awesome. Now I'm going to go talk to him, and like he's already been a Sequoia company for a year maybe. And they think they're hot to trot, they're off and running, blah, blah, blah. Our opinion would be, well, you need one of the GPs to call you before the deal's done. Like, I want you involved in this round. That's super important. So if you're a government person, now you're thinking critically about this. I don't know. Maybe you're like, I'm going to build a high-value target list. We're going to target these motherfuckers and figure out what the deal's out there. Figure out where the unicorns are coming. We're going to get them in AFWERX. Or I'd say, okay, let's say there's 10 VCs. There's 8 GPs at each one. That means there's 80 guys in the valley that account for 97% of the unicorns. How do I know them? Do I know somebody on their deal team? Do we go to school together? Do I go on LinkedIn and do some reverse engineering and figure out how I actually get an introduction, or can I put my thumb on the pulse of what they're actually looking at those deal teams? If I do one, if let's say I get access to 1 or 2 of those guys, can I say, hey, what deals are you interested in? How can I help you? I don't want to get paid for it, right? I mean, that would be my perspective. It's how can I good dude you so that you call me in the future on your next deal? It's all right, well, here's this company. Put your money where your mouth is. Go earn some revenue. Cool. Here's the revenue. Here's the investment. The guy thinks that's great. Calls me back day after, Sibber phase 2s are released. It's this is crazy. And what do? They say, here's 5 more companies. 5 more companies nobody's ever heard of except for him. And this guy's the best in the world at choosing these companies. Done the technical due diligence, done the business dynamic due diligence, done the financial due diligence. Yeah, kind of a better bet. So that's kind of finding out the network.
Yep.
Yeah. Power law, that's what it is. So you're 10%, performs everything, right? If I make, what is it, top 10 guys make 97% of the profits. Same deal in my fund, right? So I make 100 investments. I would never do that. It doesn't work like that. But you make 100 investments, 10 companies will return your entire 3x, 4x multiple. The other 90 companies that we have just returned the first $100 million that I took from the investors. And here's an example of what Tier 1 VCs look like. I mean, this is not a written thing, and there's no way that Harpoon's actually up there. I just put that up there because I made the fucking slide. But they're, all the usual suspects, right? Boy, Lightspeed, Benchmark, Zell, Coachla, EPC. I mean, these are great guys, right? So you're looking for your Sibbers and whatever, or you're looking for investment maybe. I mean, it really matters. It's signaling it really, really matters. And this means something, right? I mean, you take money from Greylock, You're going to have access into the Israeli market. You take money from founders, boom, you're going to be favorable with the current administration. You take money from Sequoia, like BBC experts. You take money from Andreessen, it's a software play. I mean, like, they're all experts in their own space. It's a very, very competitive. The deals are super, uber competitive. They're Lyft competitive. They're super competitive. And but the second you get your money and you get your piece, it's really, really collaborative. All of a sudden, life is like, I got like 10%, now I want to share with Andreessen because they're the best guys for scaling and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, wow, that was like, you're like bipolar. Okay, so from AFWERX, like, what is AFWERX doing that's like, oh, that's meaningful? You want to talk about super?
Yeah, definitely. So cash is king. Cash is king for the startups. Cash is king in the VC community. When you're looking at a startup and you're evaluating a startup, cash is king. So getting to that cash sooner. And so what the SIBR process really does is get cash into the pockets, get investment into these startups fast. Best way to do that, all of these phase one here is MOU. MOU, you can get it, MOU direct phase 3 is going to be really, really important, but getting cash into that startup's hands is amazing, and it is what the Air Force is doing really, really well right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Air Force basically says, listen, I'll give you $1.5 million if you have a matching term sheet for $1.5 million from the venture capital space. 1 for 1. I mean, that's pretty awesome, right? Like, from a VC perspective, I'm like, stand by. So I'm going to get $3 million of value for this company. I mean, half it's diluted, to me, of course. But, like, that's pretty awesome. I don't have to involve anyone. So say I have $30 million. I'm going to make 20 investments at $1 million a piece. That means, like, I don't know, I set them into, like, AFWERX, all in phase 2s, and, like, 3 months later, I've got $60 million of portfolio value that I've collected, and I have, like, immediate markups, and everyone thinks it's awesome, and they're like, holy shit, you're finding companies that immediately are getting revenue. It's like, yeah, that's because I know, I know AFWERX. You're like, what's AFWERX? That's special operations? Yeah. All right, so this is my alter ego, right? Like, I've been told it's really like Army Gold, but we'll go with this one for now. So everyone knows Carl von Clausewitz, right? The guy wrote On War, fucking doctrinal shit for maneuver warfare. Like, if you're a good Marine, like, don't read the Bible at night, you read, Carl von Clausewitz. That's your Bible. And but when you get into the outside, right, those lessons still apply. So, we like to joke, we call it On Startup. Here's our guy, von Clausewitz. Here's the final observations. I'll let you kick it with network.
Yeah, network is so important. So it's really important on the VC side. It's really important on the startup side. So things like this, things like a Collider event, bringing the right people together to get those MOUs, but the right strategic partners. We started out with who's investing and why. So the right strategic partners really matter to getting you to that next phase.
Discipline is key. Remember I was talking about, like, the best industry leaders, the guys that are equal parts disciplined and creative. I can't stress that enough. I think that if you're looking at people to hire, you should be using that as a metric. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about engineers, they're on no, I'm just kidding. But there's different people that are suited for different jobs, obviously. But from my perspective, the best leaders of companies, the best companies, are folks that are equal part disciplined, equal part creative. Last night, I had dinner with a guy, right? Like, one of them's got like this. They're both serial entrepreneurs worth tons of money, super good dudes. They're here in Austin. They like own a bunch of restaurants. It's like really like whiz-bang stuff. We walk in, everything's free. It's like, all right, but the CEO's super great. He's got this huge beard. He's talking about quantum shit. We walk outside. He's got like a McLaren sports car. And you're like, dude, what is going on in your life? His license plate, quantum. It's like, he's badass, right? And then his COO is this guy who's like driving a fucking Bolt. And he's like, well, it doesn't make financial sense to buy that. Like, dude, how rich are you? You're super rich, right? Like, and it's because the team is like equal parts disciplined and creative. So like, that's like, maybe a good example of that I just lived last night. And then drive and charisma. Listen, people that are CEOs of startups, they have drive and charisma. Jeff Byers from AFWERX, they're awesome. Guys, super, out there making, this stuff. But then we got you on time, on target. Jeff needs you. Just met you guys yesterday, right? Like, that's like a really great team. So the issue here is like, if you got charisma, that's great. If you got drive, that's great. But make sure that it's also equal parts measured and calculated, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I got. Any questions for us? I got a laser pointer. Okay. The FAA is going to arrest me for this. We're done. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Hi, how are you? Mike Berlin.
In reality, the company is now a champion.
Okay. Okay. You come from the biopharma industry, like,
I'm away.
who's your customer? Like that, I'm sorry, like, what is the, like, are you selling to like the,
I want to say, right?
you know what I mean, not brands.
When I get it, like, folks know that's important. And so you gotta ask them. But it's just like, how do you get
Let's definitely talk to the consumer later. We're doing a,
yeah, exactly.
Are we doing a holiday program this fall? So if your targets are going to government
What they do is they actually
yeah, so right now it's clear. Okay.
And if you look at it, and you make the introduction, they end up investing in it. Once they say the so like basically incorporate and cash. Everything in the valley is being so VCs have big networks of that. You know, I mean, everyone's like, the other day I was chatting about this company. So, you know, I mean, you know,
Yeah, let's have some more conversations. Where do you want to?
And that's why, like, you know what I mean? Go do your Instagram or whatever.
You just want me to want you. I know how this works.
Just taking notes.
Yeah. No, amazing. Yeah, let's talk. Right over there.
I'll go take a look at it. So, yeah, for 2 minutes, totally fine. So, so we have a 3D printing play. However, a lot of people in the space are looking for it. And so let me take a look at it. Do you have a card? I'll be right over there. See you. Thank you, man. I appreciate
So if you sense the apology, it's still giving as well as the emails.